Hello friends, in this video we're going to discuss the new scandals in Poland in July of 26. We have three topics in this video. Where did the Polish missiles for Patriot go? Was there a hidden commercial calculation in the declassified aid to Ukraine? And why is the legendary Jarosław Kaczynski putting a historical roadblock in Kyiv's path to the European Union? Let's talk now. Please like the video and subscribe. Thanks to everyone who supports. These simple actions take just 2 seconds. Thank you for your support. Yes, a like in support of aerodynamics is a must. Well, let's get down to business. On our agenda today is a classic session of exposing the truth about Polish defense policy. Yes, a serious scandal is brewing everywhere. Vice Speaker Krzysztof Bosak, who represents the remarkable far-right Confederation Party, is speaking. He made a proposal to completely ban the export of weapons without the direct consent of the parliament. The reason for such a move is, let's say, related to aviation and anti-aircraft matters. According to Bosak, this distinguished gentleman, or rather Mr., the current Polish government, in the strictest secrecy and bypassing the deputies, could have transferred scarce anti-aircraft missiles for the Patriot air defense systems to Ukraine. Write in the comments what you think. Why does Poland need anti-aircraft missiles for the Patriot? What do you think? Let's break down the situation. Mr. Bosak himself literally states the following: "We have very alarming information. If this is true, then it's a scandal." And here we see a brilliant political maneuver. Pay attention to the wording. They could have passed it on, or they might not have, right? Like in the joke about the blonde and the dinosaur, the probability of this event is 50%. For those who don't know, I'll briefly explain what they asked the blonde. "And what's the probability that you'll go outside and meet a dinosaur?" She says, "Well, it's 50-50. They asked her, "How is it 50-50? She says, "Well, either I'll meet one or I won't." So it's the same thing here. They might have passed it on or not. There's no evidence, yet the accusation is already made. And now the executive branch, the cabinet of ministers, will have to justify themselves no matter what. They'll have to explain themselves again and again to the electorate, trying to prove a negative. The head of President Nawrocki's office has already joined the chorus of critics, Mr. Zbigniew Bakucki, who also poured fuel on the fire, repeating it emphatically, "They could have." But the most interesting thing, actually everything about this news is remarkable, but I like Confederation's position. Before us is a classic example of, well, I don't know what to call it, political bipolarity. On one hand, the right-wingers regularly tell the average Pole that Russia isn't really an enemy. There's no need to fight with them. They don't plan to attack. Geopolitically, we need to be allies, so what's the issue? But as you can see, as soon as the conversation turned to missiles, Bosak immediately switched his rhetoric and spoke plainly. "Guys, what are you doing? Patriots, the Patriot system. That's the only thing we can use to shoot down Iskanders when they come flying from the Kaliningrad region." Let me ask you, if you're saying that Putin is practically a friend, right, that we should be friends with him, that he's not a threat, then why are you clinging so desperately to anti-missile systems? Interesting. Looks like logic has left the chat. Yes, the overall context is adding fuel to the fire, of course. The relationship between Warsaw and Kyiv, to be honest, is not in the best shape. Well, we've already talked about this more than once, right? The Ukrainian side managed to name one of the AFU units after the UPA. Comment below if you think Ukrainians had the right to name it as they wished. For any Pole, of course, it's the UPA. It's not just an abbreviation, but a direct association with the tragic events in Volhynia in 1943. So, against this background, the news that the government could have secretly given away scarce weapons sounds to the Polish voter like some kind of blatant mockery. What do you think you're doing? Right-wing parties skillfully use national pride and security, though they sometimes contradict themselves about friendly neighbors. But what can you do? Now the government will simply have to start the fascinating process of explaining itself. Where did the missiles go, and did they even go anywhere at all? Next, this is not the end of the story yet. Friends, Poland will declassify its military aid to Ukraine dating back to 2022. Polish Defense Minister Władysław Kosiniak-Kamysz, our favorite, announced his intention to declassify information about all military aid. This decision is aimed at ensuring transparency and cooperation between the countries. Well, to be fair, I have to say, friends, yes, Poland helped tremendously, especially in the first stage, which was perhaps the most critical. By 2026, as far as I know, according to my information, the total amount of military support exceeded 18 billion zlotys, which is more than 4 billion euros. Yes, I remember that terrible spring of 2022. Warsaw very quickly delivered several hundred tanks, about 300 to 350 Soviet tanks according to experts, T-72 tanks, Crab howitzers, and MiG-29 fighter jets, and continues to pay for tens of thousands of Starlink terminals. A huge thank you to them. Without this equipment, Ukraine might have been able to hold the front in 2022, but it would have been much harder. But at the same time, it should be noted that this was not a selfless gift. The Polish state gained direct economic and strategic benefits from this in three areas. First, modernization. Poland got rid of its old Soviet equipment, which was already due for decommissioning anyway. In return, Warsaw launched a large-scale rearmament program, buying American Abrams tanks and Korean K2C. Next, financial maneuvers. We should mention those as well. A significant part of the cost of the transferred equipment was compensated by the European Peace Facility. The European Union reimbursed Warsaw in euros for the old equipment. And then there's the commercial calculation. Ukraine signed the largest defense contracts with the Polish military-industrial complex. They filled the factories with orders for howitzers and armored vehicles for real money. Of course, it's clear that this money came from the West. And the main commodity here is strategic time. By transferring tanks, Poland was buying its own security for the Polish general staff. But it's more profitable, as cynical as it may sound, for the old equipment if it fought and burned in the worst-case scenario on the eastern front somewhere near Donetsk, near Zaporizhia, and in the hands of Ukrainian soldiers, than to have this whole bloodbath happening near Suwałki at home. The capitalist system doesn't know altruism. It was a pragmatic exchange of hardware for security and subsidies. That's just how it is. Of course, I don't understand anything, and you can write about it in the comments and tell what really happened there. Next, we have our third piece of news. The leader of the largest Polish opposition party, Law and Justice, the legendary Jarosław Kaczynski, has come out with a programmatic letter reminiscent of a manifesto to his party comrades. The topic is probably one of those eternal ones, the European prospects of Kyiv through the prism of historical memory. Well, let's just analyze Mr. Kaczynski's position. He states directly, without any hesitation, that Ukraine, with its cult of Bandera and other criminals who glorified the UPA and OUN, will not enter the European Union. If we win the elections, we definitely won't allow this. Well, here we need to understand the nuance here. This is a classic pre-election manifesto. It's the year 2026 and the comrades are actively laying the groundwork for a return to power. Kaczynski is hitting the most sensitive spot for the Polish voter, their historical pride, their national trauma. For Warsaw, the glorification of OUN-UPA figures in any format is not just some complicated pages of history. This was officially recognized in Poland as the genocide of the Polish people, right? Meanwhile, the PIS leader adds a key disclaimer to avoid accusations of playing into Moscow's hands. He says, "We've supported Ukraine's independence from the start and made a huge contribution to saving their statehood." So, the logic is this: helping on the battlefield, that's us. Okay, we'll send you some hardware, that's in our geopolitical interest. But letting the neighbor into the common European house with their current ideological baggage, well, sorry, that's something we won't allow ourselves to do. Write in the comments what you think about this. Will Ukraine be accepted into the EU or not? And right away, Kaczynski skillfully redirects the anger toward internal opponents. Well, traditionally, the government of Donald Tusk took the blame. There is a certain group of Poles who think that Ukrainians and Tusk are to blame for everything, or Ukrainians and Tusk. Basically, it's one of them or all of them. So, and Kaczynski, of course, accused Tusk of making excessive concessions to Kyiv, of being too soft. Well, it turns out to be a great campaign narrative. The current government, whoever they are, agrees to everything. They're weak. Kyiv doesn't respect our memory, and only PiS is capable of taking a tough stand. In the end, we have the following. The Polish opposition is officially raising a historical barrier on Ukraine's path to the European Union. And now Kyiv will have to try really hard to explain to Polish society how their European integration is compatible with Bandera monuments. We will be watching this diplomatic showdown. There is a lot of interesting stuff ahead, my friends. Friends, what else is interesting? I would like to ask, what do you think? Have there been other historical barriers like this in the history of the European Union or not? I'll tell you, yes, there have. I put together a short piece. I hope you'll find it interesting. Here are three of the most striking and tough examples from recent history. First, and let me say, political veto is not just a precedent. It's a classic tool that has been used for years. Well, let's get straight to the point. The first example is Greece versus Macedonia, a blockade that lasted 27 years. This is the most striking example of a total historical veto. In 1991, the former Yugoslav Republic declared independence under the name Republic of Macedonia. Athens immediately blocked it from integrating anywhere into both the European Union and NATO. What is the essence of their claims? Greece says that the name Macedonia, the use of ancient symbols, and the appropriation of figures like Alexander the Great is a theft of Greek historical heritage and a hidden territorial claim to the northern Greek province of Macedonia. As a result, the country spent 27 years in international isolation under the humiliating abbreviation FYROM, the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia. The barrier was only lifted after Skopje capitulated in the historical dispute. In 2018, the Prespa Agreement was signed. The country officially changed its name to North Macedonia, renamed all its airports, and dismantled some monuments to ancient heroes. That's how it was, my friends. Next is the second story, Bulgaria versus North Macedonia. Here, it's about language and national heroes. As soon as Skopje reached an agreement with Greece, a new historical overseer appeared at the doorstep, sunny Bulgaria. In 2020, Sofia vetoed the start of real negotiations on North Macedonia's accession to the European Union. What are the main points of contention? The Bulgarians demanded that their neighbor officially recognize that the Macedonian language is not an independent language, but a regional dialect of Bulgarian, and that Macedonian identity itself has Bulgarian roots and was artificially created within Tito's Yugoslavia after World War II. In addition, a fierce dispute arose over historical figures. For example, the revolutionary Goce Delchev. Both countries consider him exclusively their national hero. The negotiations were completely paralyzed, but under pressure from France in 2022, a compromise was reached. Skopje was required to amend its constitution and officially list Bulgarians as a constituent people, as well as to revise the content of history textbooks within the framework of a joint intergovernmental commission. This process is still stalling, my friends. The third point, that's an interesting story, Slovenia versus Croatia, about borders and Yugoslavia's legacy. When the Croats joined the European Union, or rather, even before they joined only recently, when they were on that long road. Its main barrier was neighboring Slovenia, which was already a member of the Union in 2008 and blocked Croatia's negotiations on 13 chapters of the EU accession dossier. What was the essence of the claim? Formally, the dispute was about the demarcation of the land and sea border in the Bay of Piran, which remained unresolved after the breakup of Yugoslavia. But the underlying issue was deeply historical and legal, and each country referred to old cadastral maps and historical rights. After all, how could you do without history, right? It was about control over access to international waters. Yes, if you view the issue more practically. In the end, Croatia lost several years. The barrier was only lifted after Zagreb agreed to submit the dispute to international arbitration, although the disputes are still ongoing. Croatia was able to join the European Union, yes, but it was a struggle. In short, friends, integration in the European Union is set up in such a way that admitting any new member requires the absolute unanimous consent of all 27 countries. Well, as for Ukraine, yes, diplomatically it has shown an unprecedented balancing act and managed to quarrel with almost all of its neighbors, probably except for Moldova. So, write in the comments whether Ukraine will be accepted into the EU or not, or if it will take decades. Actually, look, every member country has an absolute right to veto at any stage, from opening the first negotiating chapter to the final ratification. That's why Kaczynski's statement about the Banderite barrier is not just some kind of threat. It's a demonstration of readiness to use a real legally established mechanism. If Warsaw decides to block Kiev for historical reasons, Brussels won't be able to do anything until the parties find a compromise. And as you can imagine, it's very difficult to find one. The Poles will say, rewrite your history textbooks and that's it, and take down the monuments. And then we'll be friends and apologize. So it might seem like it was just a joke, and that's enough, but no, it wasn't a joke. So friends, nevertheless, please write comments and leave likes. Take care of yourselves and your loved ones. Greetings to the working class turners, milling machine operators, and a big hello to the eyebrow mechanic. Also, write the city where you watched from, that's important too. I'll know who watches my videos or listens until the end. That's all for now. See you next time.